What's up everybody, welcome back. So in the last episode we made some improvements to our setup, and in today's episode I want to actually start using our GameState. So we're going to use it to display the player names in game, and then we're also going to set up a chat box in the lobby so players can chat with each other. And after that, in the next episodes, we're going to start setting up our first PvP game mode, which is going to be free for all. And then we're going to have some options to set like the match duration and the score limit and things like that. And we're going to have a match timer in game as well. So those are the things we're going to work on in the next few episodes. And today we're going to start with the player names and the chat box in the lobby. If you like the project and you want to get your hands on the project files, you can leave a small donation on my Ko-fi page or become a YouTube member, and then you will get access to the premium channels in my Discord, and those will give you access to the download of this project file. And if you don't want to pay anything, you can just follow the videos for free and learn a whole lot more as well. So thanks for those announcements, and we're gonna start with today's video right away. So first of all, let's start in the actual HUD widget. So let's open up our in-game HUD. And in here in the designer, we need to make a few small changes. So I want to remove the borders for players that are not playing. So we need to make sure that the borders are actually a variable. So let's do that first. I'm going to copy the player name part of the text. And this is going to be the border player name 0. And then we're just going to name all the other borders as well. And make sure they are variables, so we can actually change them and delete them if we want to. There we go. So now select all 4 of them, and I'm going to turn them into a variable. So we have the borders as a variable right now. And the next thing I want to do is grab the first one of these player names, and I'm going to set the minimal desired width for that one, so the actual text, to 225 units, so it gets a little bit bigger and it stays that way. And that's all we really need to do in the designer. So now we can take a look at the event graph, because we can make a few small changes in here as well. First of all, let's take a look at our event construct. So let's go to the actual event graph. And over here we still have a delay of 2 seconds, and we're not gonna need that anymore. So let's get rid of the delay entirely. And then we make an array of our player name text variables. So I want to do the same thing for the borders, and the actual part where we set the player names, we're simply gonna delete that, because we're gonna do that in another way. And I'm going to tell you why. So right now we have to access each player's player array on the PlayerState to actually get the name of that player. So for one player we need to access 3 player states, and we're going to make sure that the server is going to store all the player names on the GameState, and then a player can simply access the GameState and get an array of all the player names at once. So that's a little bit more efficient. So for now we're simply going to delete all of this stuff, and then we have event construct, where we set the color and opacity for the blood overlay, create the player name text array, and we're going to do the same thing for the borders. So let's grab all 4 of the borders that we just turned into a variable, and we're going to make sure that we turn them into an array as well, and we want to do it in the same order. So I have border 0, 1, 2 and 3. So we're going to turn this into an array. Oh, really? And then we need to promote that array to a variable. So that's going to be all player names borders. And with that array in place, we can actually set up the function to update our player names. So let's create a new function, and we're going to call this one update player names. And we're going to give it one input, and that's going to be an array of text variables. So that's all of the player names. And turn it into a text array. So first of all, let's promote this to a local variable. So that's going to be local all player names. And then I want to get the length of this array. So drag off here, get the length. and I'm going to store the length in a variable as well. So promote to local variable, and that's the local player count. Then we're going to grab a for each loop, and we're going to loop through all of the text for the player names. So we're going to grab in all player name text array, and we're going to loop through all of those. And what we want to do, first of all, we want to check if we actually need to remove this border or not. So we're going to grab the array index and compare that to the player count. So if the array index is greater than the player count, so that's our local variable, and we actually need to subtract 1 of the player count, that's my bad. So subtract 1, because this is the length of the array. Oh, freaking really. Thank you. So now we need to grab a branch in here. This is going to be hooked up to the loop body. And then let me see if this is true. Then we actually need to hide this player name because there's no player in the game for this one. So we can drag off the array element and we can set the visibility. So we want to set the visibility to hidden. And we want to make sure that we also hide the border that goes with it. So we're going to grab our all player names borders array, and we're going to get a copy from here. And then we can get the copy from the same index as from the loop body and plug it into the set visibility node as well. So that will make sure the border hides and shows at the same time. And for the other side of the branch, we want to do the same thing, but this time we want to show the actual name and the border. So let's plug in the array element and also the player name border. And we're going to set this to visible. And then we want to set the actual text. So we can drag off our array element over here and we can simply set the text. So plug this in over here, and then we want to get our local all player names array, and we're going to get a copy from the index of our for each loop, and we can plug it in over here, and that should make it work. So now we can call this function, and this will update all of the player names and hide and show the text and the borders. So with this stuff in place, we're going to set up the GameState, and we're going to use a RepNotify for that. So inside of our framework folder, let's open up our new shooter GameState, and there's nothing in here yet, so let's go to the blueprint editor. Now, first of all, let's set up event begin play, and we want to get the player controller stored in a variable here. So we're going to get our player controller, and we can simply get the one at index 0, and then we want to cast it to our shooter player controller, and we're going to promote this one to a variable. So promote to variable, and that's our BP shooter player controller. So that's the event begin play we need, and then we want to create a new variable on here, and that's going to be all player names. That's going to be an array of text variables, so let's turn that into an array of text. And for this variable, we're going to set the replication to RepNotify, and this is actually the first time that we're going to use it in this series, and I probably should have used it earlier, but I'm going to explain what it does right now. So we set it to RepNotify, and you will notice it will create a function called onRepAllPlayerNames. And as soon as the server changes this variable, the onRepAllPlayerNames function will fire on all of the clients and the server, and then in here you can do something you want to do after this variable changed. So it's kind of like a multicast event, but not really in the same way, because this is a little bit smoother and easier to use in some cases. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a custom event on our event graph, and we're going to call this update HUD player names. Now we don't need to replicate anything in here. We're simply going to grab a setter for our array, and then we're going to pass on the actual variable to the event. And then all we need to do is set up our RepNotify for the all player names. So we're going to open up this function, And we're going to drag in our shooter player controller, and let's turn this one into a validated get. So right click and then all the way at the bottom, convert to validated get. And if our player controller is valid, then we're going to get the HUD from here. So get our in-game HUD. And then we can simply call our update player names function that we just created. So if this is valid, we're going to plug it in, and then we can plug in the array over here. So now every time the server is going to change it over here, this event will fire. The player controller will then be called to update the player names with the new array, and that should update the array for all players. So that's kind of how that works. Now what we want to do is go to our shooter game mode, and we need to make a few small changes in there, and then this should work. So let's dive into the shooter game mode. Let me see this one. Now first of all, we need to make sure that we get our game state, and we're storing that as a variable. So we're going to go to event begin play, and before we have the is game mode ready boolean, we're going to make a little bit of room. So we need to get our game state, and we want to cast it to our custom game state. So cast to shooter game state. And we're going to promote this one to a variable. So that's our shooter game state. Okay, I'll leave the spaces in there for you guys. Okay, so there we go. And then we want to connect it up back to the is game mode ready boolean. So this one actually gets set to true. And with that one in place, we're going to create a new function to update the names on the game state. So let's create a new function in here, and that's going to be update game state names. And in here, what we want to do, first of all, we're going to grab a for each loop, and we're going to grab all of our connected controllers. So we can loop through all of our controllers. And we want to get the player profile from this controller. So let's drag off here and get the player profile. And from the player profile, we can get the name. So we're going to break the player profile structure. And then we're simply going to put all of these names in an array. So let's create a local variable, and that's our local all player names. So that's an array of text variables. And then we're going to set an array element over here. So let's drag in the local variable set array element. And we can plug this one into the loop body. Make sure the index is connected to the array index. We want to enable size to fit, and the item is going to be the player name. So that will put all of the names in an array. And then when the loop is completed, we're going to drag in our shooter game state. And from here we can simply call the update HUD player names function. So update HUD player names, plug this one in, and then pass on the local array. And that should make it work. So let's compile and save it. And then if we go back into our event graph, we need to call this in a few places. So first of all, we want to grab our event on logout. So if a player leaves the game, we also want to update the player names. So we're going to grab the update player names on the game state and connect it up over here. And then we also want to call it when we start a level. So right now we want to go to the level start endless wave function. And that's over here, and we can actually get rid of this delay as well. We don't need it anymore, and we can simply drag in our update game state names, and we can plug it in right between here. So now if the level loads and the map starts, we're going to update the game state names. Okay, so this should actually make the names work. So let's continue setting up the chat box in the lobby. And first of all, we need to go into our menu controller because we want to add a boolean in here. So let's go to the event graph, and over here we have our initial setup event, and this event will get called as soon as the player controller enters the game, and the game mode that will then call this event on the player controller. So it will have to wait till the save slot name is loaded, and then it has to load the actual profile. So we want to add a boolean right after here, so we make sure we do not actually try to do anything with the loaded profile before it's actually loaded. So let's create a new boolean, and we're going to call this is profile loaded. So by default it's false, and over here we're going to drag it in and we're going to set it to true. And we are on the owning client, so we are on the local player controller, so this will be set locally, so we need to keep that in mind. That's good, that's where we want to use it. So with that one in place, let's go to our widget lobby, and we're gonna start some changes in here. So let's open our lobby menu, and first of all let's do the designer part. So I'm gonna add a chat box over here in the bottom of the screen. So first of all, let's grab a border, drag it in here, and I'm gonna change the name of the border. So that's the border chat box. And we want it to be a variable so we can delete it in a solo game. And then I'm gonna make the border black. And let me see for the sizes, I'm gonna look at my example project. So I have the position at 0 - 50. And I should set the anchor first, by the way, so it's anchored to the bottom center of the screen. And then I'm going to set the position to 0 - 50, and it's going to be 800 units by 220, and the alignment is 0.5 by 1. So that's going to be the chat box. And then first of all, I want to grab a vertical box and drop it on top of this border. And inside of the vertical box, I'm gonna drop another border with some text. So let's grab a border in here again. And on top of that border, let's drop some text. So this is simply going to be the title. So for this border, I want to make it transparent. So I'm gonna set the alpha to 0.5. And then I want to get the correct font. So let me copy and paste that from another text block. And I'm going to shrink it down actually, so I'm going to make the font 18, I think. There we go. So this is simply going to say chat. And then I want to align it to the left so the border doesn't extend that far. So let me set the horizontal alignment to left. And then grab the border and also set the alignment to left. So we have a nice little title over here. Then the next thing we want to add is a second border. So let's grab a border again, drop it on top of the vertical box. And on top of this border, we're going to add a scroll box. So let's look for a scroll box. Let me see, that should be somewhere around here. Oh, really? So the scroll box, let's drop it on top of the second border. Now for the second border, I want to actually fill it. So I'm going to set it to fill. It will fill the rest of the widget. And then let's change the alpha again. So that's going to be 0.5. So my scroll box will also be set to fill. So it will fill the same area. And we want to give this a proper name. So that's going to be our scroll box chat. And then let me see, we want to grab, we actually need to make this one a variable, by the way. So let's make sure we enable the scroll box as a variable. And then we want to add another border. So let's go back to the border over here, and we're going to drop that on top of the vertical box as well. And in that last border, we want to drop some editable text. So that's this one, editable text, and drop it on top of the last border. Now the last border, let's change the alpha over here as well. So that's going to be 0.5. And then I'm going to grab all three of these borders, and I'm going to set the padding to 2. So we actually have a little bit of spacing in between them. And for the editable text, we want to change the name probably. So I'm going to turn this into editable text chatbox or chat. So that's a variable, that's good to go. And then we could change the font in here as well. So I should be able to paste it and then just shrink it down a little bit. So 18 again. And then for the color, I want to make sure that I disable the inherit. And let me double check my notes quickly. So I'm going to disable inherit over here, and I'm going to make the color white. And then if we compile, the size should adjust as well. So for the hint text, let me type message. so the player knows he can type something in here. And that should pretty much be our chat box. So we can compile and save it, and then we can make a few small changes inside of our event graph. So let me switch my notes quickly. Let me double check. So we want to make sure that we get rid of the border for the chat box in a solo game. So let's go to our event construct over here, and then let me double check. So we actually have a branch in here where we're checking for a solo game, and if this one is true, we can simply plug in the border for the chat box into the remove from parent node where we remove the player ready text. So let's look for the border chat box over here, and we're gonna drag it in and simply connect it up to remove from parent if the solo game branch is true. So that's one of the things we need to change, and then we also want to make sure that we actually grab our player name and store it in a variable. So that way, if we type a message into the chat box, we can display our player name in front of it. And right now we do not have access to our player name yet. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna grab event construct and make a little bit of room. So in the beginning of our event construct, we're setting 3 arrays for the player names and the borders and that kind of stuff. And right after that, I'm going to disconnect it for now, and I'm going to get my owning player. Oh. So this will actually return my player controller, so we can cast it to our menu controller and plug this in. So on our menu controller, we created the boolean. So from here, we're going to get our isProfile loaded boolean, and we're going to plug this one into a branch. So we need to make sure that the profile is actually loaded on the player controller before we try to grab the name. So if this is false, we're going to delay until next tick. Delay until next tick. Plug it into the false pin and then plug it back into the branch. And if it's true, our profile should be valid, so then we can drag off our menu controller and get our player profile. And from the player profile, we're going to get our player name, so let's break it. And then we can promote the player name to a variable. So promote to variable, and that's going to be my player name. Make sure we plug this into the true pin, and then we can continue with the function like we used to. So we're going to continue to the cast for the GameInstance. So this will make sure we have a player name to display in front of our chat messages. And then let's create a function to actually add messages to our chat box. So I'm grabbing my notes again quickly. And we're going to go to functions and create a new one. And this is going to be add chat message. For the function, we need one input, and that's going to be a text variable. So give it one input, and that's the actual message. And that's a text variable. Then over here, we want to construct an item. So let's look for construct object from class. So this is kind of like a create widget node, but we can use this to just create a text object or something like that instead of an actual widget. So for the class, we want to look for text. And then if we scroll all the way down to the T part, we have the text block with a little T in a square in front of it. So that's the one you want to select, a simple static text widget. So we're going to create that. And to make sure this actually looks similar to the rest of our text, we want to drag off here and we want to set the font. And for the font, we can drag off and make a slate info font. And over here, we can set our settings. So we have the font family. I'm using the Orbitron font. And then for the size, I'm going to set it to 18 again. And the rest should be fine. So now the font will match as well. My default color is white, so that should be good to go. Then we're going to drag off this one again, and we're going to set the text of this text element. So drag off here, set text, plug it in, and the text is going to be the message from the input. So just grab it from the input of the function. And then what we want to do is grab our scrollbox chat. So we want to grab that from the variables that should be in here, scrollbox chat. And in here we're going to add a child. So plug this one in, and the content is going to be the text object that we just created. So let's plug it into the content. So now it's added to the chat box, and then we want to drag off the chat box again, and we want to scroll to the end. So if the message is outside of the screen, we scroll all the way down so we can still see it. So plug it in, scroll to end, and that's good to go. So then we can return. And we have a function to add messages to our chat box. So let me see, we might want to create another event in here. I'm going to check my notes quickly. No, first of all, we're going to go to our GameMode and PlayerController. So first of all, let's open our menu, PlayerController. So let's go to the framework folder, menu, PlayerController. So in here we want to create an event that the server can call to make the messages display on all of the clients. So we're going to right click and create a custom event, and we're going to call this the update chatbox. So this event needs to run on the owning client, so replication, run on owning client, and we're going to make it reliable. Then we're going to grab our lobby menu in here, and we're going to check if it's valid. So is valid. Plug it in, and if the lobby menu is actually valid, we can simply call our add_chat message function that we just created. So plug this in over here, and then we're going to pass on the message to the actual event. So we have that set up as an input. So the server can call this event from the game mode for each client, and this will add the message to the chat box. Now we also need an event that the clients can call to tell the server what their message is, so they can send it to the server, and then the server can send it back to all of the other clients. So we're going to go to our menu game mode now. And inside of the menu game mode, we're going to create a new function, and that's called send chat message. So send chat message. And let me grab my notes quickly. It's going to be a pretty simple function. So we're going to give it one input, and that's the message again. So that's the text variable message, and then turn it into a text. Then we're going to grab a for each loop, and we're going to loop through all of our connected player controllers. And for all of the connected controllers, we can simply call the event on the controller that we just created. So update chatbox. Plug it into the loop body and plug in the message from the input. So with this event in place, we can go back to our menu controller. And then in the menu controller, we're going to create a second custom event, and that's called server send chat message. So custom event, server send chat message. So this event is replicated to run on the server, and we're going to set it to be reliable. And now this event can be called by the clients to tell their chat message to the server. Then the server will pass the message to the game mode. From the game mode, it will be passed on to this event back to all the clients. So from here we can actually get our game mode because we are the server, and we can cast it to our menu game mode. Plug it in over here, and we want to call our send chat message function that we just created, and we can simply pass on the message as an input for the event. So with those events in place, we actually have everything in place for the server and the clients that we need to call. So now we can go back to our lobby menu and make the final changes in here. So in the lobby menu, we entered the editable text box, and we want to create an event for that. So let's look for the editable text chat, and we want to grab an event for the onText committed. So let's add an event, and let's align it a little bit better. There we go. So first of all, I'm going to drag off the commit method, and I'm going to switch on it. So we want to make sure that we only actually send the message if we press enter, and if we press escape or just click outside of the text box, that we do not send the message. So we're going to grab our editable text box in here again, and we're going to set the text. So set text, editable text, and we're simply going to leave this empty and plug this one into the onCleared and to the onMoved focus. So if we press escape or move the focus to another part of our widget, the text will be removed and it won't be sent. Then we're going to make sure that we actually have text inside here. So we're going to drag off the text and we're going to compare it. So not equal to, and let's make it case insensitive, doesn't really matter. Then we're going to drag off here and make a literal text, and we're simply going to keep the text empty. So we want to make sure there is actually a message to send. So we're going to plug this one to the default and the onEnter committed, and make sure we plug in the condition. So then we need to determine if we are the server or if we are a client. So that will determine how we're going to send the message. So let's grab another branch in here. We're going to plug this into the true pin, and then we're going to check if we are the server. So we are on a widget, so we know we are the local client, but we could be a client or we could be a server. So we are the local player, but we can be the client or a server. So if we are the server, we can actually call our GameMode directly. So we can simply get our GameMode and we can cast it to our menu GameMode. So we can connect this to the true pin. And if we are the server, then we can simply call our send chat message directly on the GameMode. No, not IA message, that's something else. Send chat message. And then there's one thing I want to do, and that's put our actual player name in front of the message, so players knows who sent it. So I'm going to drag in my player name that we created in the variables earlier. And for the message, I'm going to drag off and I'm going to say format text. So then I'm going to format it. So open bracket A, close bracket. And then I'm going to put double dots. I'm not sure how it's called. And then I'm going to put a space in there and then open bracket B, close bracket. So the first one is going to be the player name. Then we have a semicolon. That's how it's called. No, not well, something like that. And for B, we can plug in the actual text from the onText committed event. So this is the message that we're going to send. And then after we hit enter, we also want to clear the text box. So I'm going to grab the editable text chat with the set text again. And I'm going to go all the way to the end and paste it in here. So after we type the message, the box will clear itself. And then if we are the client, we actually need our event on the player controller to make sure that we can replicate it to the server. So then we're going to get our owning player. And for the owning player, we can cast it to our menu controller, hook this up, and on the menu controller we created an event. So that was the server send chat message event. So server send chat message. And we can actually plug in the format text node directly in here. And after we send the message, we want to clear the text box as well. So with this in place, we should have a working chat as well. So let's have a little look and see if we did everything correctly. So we could take a 3-player game, for example. Now let me change a profile as well, so you can see the names in front of the messages are changing as well. So we actually have a chat box, so that's good. Now let's see if players are joining. If everything is working. So let me type something in here, and you can see my name is in front of the text and it will update for the host and the client as well. Now let's grab a third client and let's type something in here. And as you can see, everything is working for clients and hosts. So we have a working chat box, and right now if we would start the game, we should also have working player names for all players in the game. And that's still working as well. So we are good to go for today's episode. It was a relatively short one, but we made a little bit of progress again. Next episode, we're going to start our PvP game modes, so that should be fun as well. For now, thanks for watching everybody. Hope you enjoyed the series. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.